Hi, welcome to round 11 recap of the candidates. Things are heating up and cooling down. We are approaching the end, and the leader, Nepomniachtchi, racking up some wins. It is about time to find out what's going to happen with the tournament, who's going to take the first place, who's going to take the second place. There are only 4 rounds left, and after this one, only 3 rounds left. Many players already losing chances for first place. Many players were desperate. Many already gave up hope, such as Firouzja, who lost a game yesterday and the previous day, and is going to face Nepo in this round 11. And there's only pride at stake for him, while for Nepo, it's all still on the cards. He is in a very good position, eager to win the tournament. The fight for the second place also could be very, very important. For that, we also have Hikaru, Fabi, and Ding still fighting. Fabi facing Ding. Very exciting battle. And we'll see what happened there as well. So lots of things to uncover. Let's get started. Let's first take a look at the game between Firouzja and Jan Nepomniachtchi, as Jan, leader of the tournament, was facing Alireza with the black pieces. Possibly a last or one of the last tests for Jan. If he loses this game, things can get still very tense and exciting. If he holds, the situation looking very good, with people trailing him behind by a full point, also facing each other and not looking in too great a shape. So Jan ready for this game. E4, of course, the solid Petrov defense. And Alireza, we heard some rumors about his preparation, but still I thought, even though he famously played a hyper bullet match against Naroditsky deep into the night in Madrid, still he's got a team of seconds, and I thought they could come up with something interesting against the Petrov and test Jan. And they did come up with a little sideline. This move c4, I've seen it before as well. The idea is to grab space here in the center and start with c4, sort of discourage d5 push. And Alireza got some space in the center indeed, but black developed very quickly. And all he has is a little bit of a lack of space here. You see white's pawn is on the 5th rank, black's pawn is on the 6th rank, so a little less space for black, but a very solid position. Game continues, knight d4, and Alireza generally tried to keep pieces in this game. This was his concept. He tried to keep all the pieces on the board. But can also be risky because it works both ways. So Jan provoked the move f3. Could weaken the e3 square a little bit, so nice little inclusion there. And after cd, queen b6, pinning the knight here. King h1, rook ac8. Rook is well placed on the semi-open file. Knight c4 is supported. Here we got a very critical position. And Alireza started to think, and it took him a long time to come up with a very creative and a very risky idea. Now, the most natural move that comes to mind is f4, chasing the knight. Now, if the knight were to go back, White's probably happy to have pushed it away, but Jan would surely go forward. b3, hitting the knight, and now nice tactic, knight e3, bishop takes, and rook takes c3. And we got rid of the knight. Generally, black is happy, I believe, to trade some pieces. When you lack space, you obviously want less pieces there on the board. So this would be a good trade for black. So f4 did not look too enticing for Firouzja, and he didn't see how to proceed. The bishop is not easy to develop it because the pawn is hanging. You cannot start with rook b1 because the knight is then hanging. There is this x-ray of the b pawn. So he, lacking a clear-cut idea, he came up with a very creative one, g4, trying to chase this knight away and start some sort of a offensive on the king side. But it is quite risky because bishop is not fully developed. This rook is also not there yet. The queen is kind of targeting the knight on d4. So things are rather risky for white. It was also possible to start with a4. This move a4 is kind of nice, in perhaps intending bishop b5 sometimes to trade these bishops and then get that f5 square for the knight. So definitely there were options for Alireza. They were better than g4, but after g4, Jan played h6, a good move. Here Alireza spent another half an hour as he saw that things are not looking so easy for him and came up with this natural follow-up h4, but this is already very weakening. Now after g5, there will be knight h5, intending knight g3 check. Then you will have to lose the tempo protecting the square with rook g1 or something, and this will clearly make you lose the pace of the attack. So h4 kind of feels like a concession, because of course this inclusion is favoring black for sure. So of course Alireza hesitated, and he should have not done it. He should have done something else. Position was not too great. It's not clear why exactly he played g4 if he doesn't have a follow-up, but you could have still tried this move a4 or maybe even knight f5 or rook g1. A lot of things were less bad than what he did, because what he did very natural and principled, just doesn't seem to work out, and he spent a lot of time here but still went for it. h4. Now black has options. Knight c4 looks very tempting, hitting the b2 pawn, but Jan saw very elegant move, just rook e8, preparing some action potentially, bringing the rook to the open file, and indeed after g5, knight h5, already the signs are worrying. Jan even included a g8, first, now in knight h5. Yeah, the knight g3 check is there. That's not very nice for white. He has to lose the pace of the attack. Rook g1, now knight g6 would be really comfortable. f4 square is under black's control. So Alireza tried king g2, intending f4. This was clearly his plan. And indeed, he does win some material here in the lines, but it seems he has strongly underestimated black's play. After knight g6, f4, and now strong piece sacked by Jan, knight x f4. Knight was anyway doomed, and after knight f4, bishop f4, queen b2, white's position is kind of collapsing. The c3 knight, it's very shaky. d4 knight protected only once, f4 bishop protected only once, pawn is protected only once, and this bishop is also in this pin and this x-ray, and there's just too many things hanging, and when there's just too much stuff hanging, you are getting overloaded everywhere. And it always reminds me of this, when you're trying to contain a balloon, the giant balloon filled with water, and there turns out to be appears a hole, and you put a hand over that hole, then there's one more hole, and you put one more hand over that hole, and when there's too much water pressure in the balloon, and then there's one more, and you put a leg there, and finally you are standing like this with your feet and the legs and hands and all of that, and you've closed up all the holes, but you know that one more hole and the whole thing will burst to hell, and that's what happens here when you are so overloaded. After knight e4, there needs to be just one final push, and everything will just fall apart. And that final push was rook c4. Bishop d8 is also, by the way, that final push, but rook c4 is a nice one. And now, yeah, Andreas' position was collapsing. Bishop e3, still trying to protect that, but again, it's so overloaded. Jan found the blow. Bishop takes g5. Boom! If bishop takes g5, this knight is falling. If knight takes g5, this bishop is falling. With it also the knight falls and the bishop falls, so like everything just crumbles. And after rook b1, queen a2, rook a1, of course black can repeat moves, but Jan has a strong shot. Rook takes d4, if bishop d4, queen d5, and if queen d4, there is queen e2. It just all falls apart, and here we get an endgame in which black has bishop and 3 pawns for a rook, which is just too much. Black is just material up and has a much safer king. Also, the king is still weak, and even in the endgame, Jan still got to attack the king and converted the game very smoothly. Here, Alireza resigned already here because you just pick up the pawn and knight will join. It's just going to be checkmate for the white king. So huge disappointment for Firouzja. A very instructive game by Jan, who punished this g4 h4 idea beautifully. Especially like the fact that here he played one preparatory move, a slow move, rook e8. This is the punishment, preparing, and then the blow comes later. Very instructive game, but let's not stop there. Look at the other games. Now, Fabio was definitely eager to really try his luck. He believes in himself always, and he always tries to pull off the miracle. He has actually succeeded sometimes. For example, there was a US championship, I believe the last one it was, where Fabio was looking in a very bad shape in the tournament, but he managed to win like the last few games and somehow pulled it off, managed to join in the end and fight for the first place. So Fabio can do it, and he believes in himself, and he tried, of course, once again to go all out against Ding. Played this anti-martial 8a4 topical line. It's played a lot also in the World Championship between Nepo and Carlsen. Ding played bishop b7, one of the 3 moves. There is 3 ways to address this threat. You can either move the pawn forward or play the rook here or play the bishop here. Each has its own pluses. So Ding develops the queen. This is all some kind of theory. Interesting thing happened here. So Fabio goes for some kind of attack, which is relatively known. The computer suggests this. GF is unplayable for some kind of reason. I believe it's just knight f5 and then queen f3 and just checkmate. And so black goes bishop to d8. It's a very strong move. And white can jump to g7 with the knight, but he needs a queen there, and it's very hard to somehow get the queen to g7. And so his attack is definitely there, but it's not clear what it leads to. You can repeat moves, of course, but it's hard to do more. And the strange thing was that here after h3, so Ding played b3, it's a computer suggestion, but Fabi started thinking here already. So I don't know, I guess he couldn't find a advantage here during his prep, and he decided to sort of play it over the board. But yeah, that wasn't a risky decision. He played rook c1, not clear if it's a good move at all, probably not. Now Ding plays king h8, and he's got this bishop a5, so he will win back the exchange. And here, white's got some weak pawns, black's got a little bit of a weaker king, sometimes f4. f4 can come, maybe some sort of attack here on the f-file, but still, after queen takes b3, if something knight g8 is there, these pawns are hanging, and it would be quite promising for black. But instead, Fabi faced rook takes b3, and now after queen a5, knight g8, bishop e3, bishop b7, another passive move. Black would play queen d7, for example, attacking this pawn, or even just trading these pawns, because the a pawn is not really gonna queen. But after bishop b7, now queen d2, suddenly Fabi had a very comfortable situation, because these pawns are for now protected, and it's hard to attack them because the pieces are placed in a somewhat of a clumsy way, and it's hard for black to double his queen and the rook against one of these targets. And to add more misery to Ding's position, here he went for the sequence where he thought he attacks the knight and the pawn, and wins the pawn at least. And suddenly, turned out of knight f5, he doesn't, because if rook b2, there is a tactic, knight d6, beautiful one. If you take, I do this fork, and in the end, it's winning for white, because this pawn is falling as well. Knight f5 was very bad news, and here Ding had to switch to plan B, knight e7, queen e7, and now white has a very promising position. This pawn structure is very weak. You need to at some point regroup the bishop and try to put pressure on the f-pawn and make it collapse. And it wasn't easy to finish it off here, but Fabi's position looks really promising. I also like the rook f1 move at some point, but the computer here points out a very interesting idea, just b4, rook b4, now bishop d2, rook b6 and a5, and it's just very unclear exactly what you give the pawn for, but in fact, you want to open the b file. That's what you do. And so after rook c6, the engine opens the b file and somehow penetrates, but it combines the threats of the b file penetration with the attack on the f6 pawn as well. So that is there. And after rook b5, now the rook leaves the 6th rank, and now you can just go rook f1 and go for the f6 pawn, because after d5, the rook is no longer defending the f6 pawn. So this is a very strong idea. The cost of a pawn to kick the rook away from here, because if a5, rook c6, now you don't get the b file and that nice b2 square, which was the case after b4, rook b4 and a5. But it's very, very hard to understand. I had 100% conviction that Fabi was not going to play this. It's just a very unhuman, very strange idea that it's just extremely deep. Fabi played natural, rook f1, king g7 was good, a5, rook c6, but this is not so simple now. If you go for bishop d2, now Ding was able to go for passive defense with rook f8, and now already if you go b4, it comes a little slower. bc dc, now if rook b1, bishop came already to rescue. So black got some sort of a defensive setup, but it's still horrible because he's got a long-term weak king, and white's king is super safe. So yeah, white could go queen f3, maybe intend some takes, queen h5, some nasty little things. Fabi for some reason played rook b1 first. Doesn't look like an improvement of his position at all. But he wanted to get the queen to f5, I guess, at some point, which is what he did, missing this strong king g8 move, probably underestimating it rather. And now there is no clear follow-up. I assume Fabi thought something would appear, but it just doesn't. And yeah, d4 was not a not the best trade, because the e4 pawn is now also a target for black. So black gets some good saving chances here, but still, of course, white has all the fun. His king is much safer, but the turnaround came around here. So Fabi could have still gone for something like this, where he is safely pushing, but of course it's already very drawish, because white's king is it's a little bit open, not in the sense that it's weak, but in the sense that black can give some checks to it, then the bishop has to go back. and so it's hard for white to proceed. But of course, it's a 2-result game. White is never risking. But Fabi chose a very ambitious way. He created the passed e-pawn, which is there, but of course it cannot really get promoted. But what happened here was even worse. At this point already, Fabi should probably just take a draw, trade queens. But of course he played for a win, as his character and tournament situation suggests. But now the queen g3, suddenly he's facing all sorts of issues. There is a threat on the rook. Bishop c6 and rook h8 are there. And to avoid the disaster, Fabi has to give up the pawn. Now it was cute variation, bishop c6, queen d2, rook h8. When if you play the queen h2 is kind of a win, but you have to play e8 knight first. And now if knight, you are checked, so you have to take before you get a check. And now white's in time to kick the queen away, because now the king is still nicely tucked in here, and this would be still within the realm of holding, something like this. But Ding played rook h8 first. Now e8 knight or queen is the same. For some reason Fabi played the queen, and here suddenly Fabi had a chance to force the matters, but it's very vague. It doesn't really look clear here whether this is going to be a perpetual check, because the king is kind of running away, and it's very hard to see if it will run away or not, so you don't want to do that. But bishop d2 was kind of better. Now if you trade rooks, you are going to hold this. What happened in the game though is that they traded queens at some point, and that led to a very unpleasant endgame for white. That is because, yeah, without the queens, it's very easy for black to activate his king, and there's no issue of king safety. And the endgame was very unpleasant. The defensive setup was to put a pawn on g3 and try to stay with the king somewhere further out here. And it's a very vague setup. Here Ding already had a chance with bishop d3, because if the king is kept in this box, it is apparently going to be lost, this position. So the king kind of had to sneak out from f2 and to the d file. It was especially instructive here after rook d7 and bishop d3, bishop b8, bishop b5. Now Fabi gave Ding a chance to again cut him off, and after rook e7, this is already lost. Instead, Ding probably thought he's winning anyway, but yeah, after king e1 by Fabi, it would be really unclear if this is winning. It looks very, very unpleasant, and I feel the chances of black to win this position are at least 50% in that kind of circumstance. Given the time situation, I would still bet on Ding here. Black, in the worst case, can get a passed f pawn at some point, as the king will get cut off at some point. Yeah, f4 will be very unpleasant. And you might simply just push it forward and hope to win the bishop for it without trading rooks, because that would be a draw, as the king is of the wrong color. The bishop is of the wrong color, in fact. But this would still be a game. Now after bishop d7, rook e7, suddenly this is all over, because king is in the mating net here. The Fabi just resigned, king comes here, rook gives a check, and then bishop comes here and it's checkmate. So a very long and crazy game where Fabi was never in danger until suddenly he was. Until basically the pivotal moment, yeah, here after queen f4, it's time to call it a day. Black just defended very well, and it's just it. Yeah, queen h4, it's not really a winning attempt, I guess. Then queen f2, but I can also play now, of course, for a win. Maybe g3, queen h6, queen f3, yeah. Then there is e8 knight and queen b7 check. So yeah, this is not really a winning attempt by black, and he would just make a draw, frankly. But after bishop e3, queen g3, suddenly he lost e-pawn, and things happened. So an important game for Ding, by the way, who has a shot now. Who has a shot? He won the last 3 games. He has to win 3 more, and then things will get very exciting. The other 2 games, now the game between Radjabov and Duda. A very uninteresting game, I have to say. It's not even very theoretical. So the player just did the double fianchetto. Timur did the double fianchetto. Duda did the single fianchetto. But a lot of trades happened, and white sometimes gets some small Catalan advantage here if he penetrates on the c6 square with some heavy pieces, controls the c file, like we had seen in the game of Ding against Duda. But here it was not the version, it just lots of trades happened. Actually, Raja could have played on a bit, but he decided to just trade these 2 pawns. and just call it a day. So not very eventful, both players not fighting for any spots, so of course they're not too motivated anymore. The other two players, on the other hand, Hikaru and Richard, played out a little longer because Hikaru still has a shot at least the second place, and they played the Sveshnikov defense. It was a very slow game. Hikaru at some point played it not very accurately. He didn't realize that probably that Rapport can sacrifice this pawn very nicely. He doesn't have to give up this strong bishop and give these two squares. He can instead just sacrifice the pawn and have very good compensation thanks to the bishop pair. And yeah, these two pawns are stopping these three. And somewhere around here, it was very, very drawish, and it should have been an easy draw. But somewhere Rapport played it a little bit inaccurately. Maybe bishop e7 was not the most accurate. Maybe h5 first, stopping bishop g4. But either way, what they got is a position where Hikaru has up a pawn, and it's a symbolic advantage. And in classical game, you're not going to win this position. You can sort of play it forever, but you cannot. If you cannot flag your opponent, it's just going to be hard because it's kind of easy to defend. You just stand. It's not fun, but you just stand and nothing will happen. So, yeah, sort of a small. It was kind of a dead draw, and then Hikaru got a chance to be on the good side, and he was on the good side, but it was still a draw, and nothing happened here. Hikaru tried to push, but as soon as you push, indeed, yeah, once you push the pawns, they become vulnerable. If you go here, I go here, and if you give up one, then okay, you also can just return bishop for the other pawn, and it was a draw. And that brings us to the end of round 11. We've got only 3 rounds left, and the tournament standing is looking very, very clear. We've got Nepo at 8 out of 11, a phenomenal score, looking in a very good shape. He's got, let us see his schedule here, he's got white against Hikaru, white against Rapport, and black against Duda. So I believe tomorrow he will just go for a draw. I think Hikaru does not have any incentive to refuse that. He is too far behind to risk it, I think. Although, no, I I don't see Hikaru risking it. It would be cool, of course, if he would. Trying to catch up a 2-point deficit would be 1-point deficit. Then just 2 rounds left, and let's see who's got Hikaru. Hikaru's then got white against Duda. Black against Ding. Yeah, hard to say. I don't know how the people take their decisions, but it's a very long shot for Hikaru, and I don't think that he will go for it. Instead, I think Hikaru will try to go for a second place, and he will try to make a draw with black tomorrow and beat Duda, and then get the second place this way. And the other pairing tomorrow that we have, so we have got Ding Liren. Ding Liren started with 3 wins towards the end, and that is something that I've mentioned after his round 9 game. I said that he could pull off a streak, and tomorrow's got white against Radjabov. Given the circumstances, it's an opportunity for him. He is completely on fire. White pieces is good. Radjabov somewhat struggling in the event still. And it's never easy to beat Radjabov, but it's an opportunity to try and get the game going. And if Ding wins that game, he's got black against Firouzja, who is a loose cannon right now, totally tilted and without the motivation. Last round, white against Hikaru as well. So Ding, there is some potential there for 2 wins, maybe even 3, but it is possible. It is never likely that somebody wins 6 games in a row, or even 5 out of 6, but it is possible. So we should discount that. And then we've got Hikaru and Fabi. Fabi, I think, yes, his dreams are shattered. In the last 4 rounds, he scored half point out of 4. Now he's got 2 blacks. I think that's over for him. He will try to relax, sleep well, and just come back to play a normal game of chess. I think he's got no ambitions any longer. I think it's very hard to come back after you're being broken thrice. And this tournament standing is not looking good for him. That's even more important. I don't think he cares so much about the losses, but just the standing is very bad. So yeah, Fabi is black against Rapport tomorrow. We'll try just to play a normal game. And we've got Duda, Firouzja, 2 players who are, always ready to fight. But in terms of fighting for first place or even second place, that's all over for them. And that brings me to the moment where I will promote my Chessable course on the candidates. There I'm analyzing today's game between Firouzja and Nepo in a little more detail. And there are puzzles and all kinds of Chessable perks as well. Do follow my YouTube channel subscribe, in fact, or follow, both. And of course, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'd like to see you in the next recap. Thank you for being a dedicated viewer. Bye bye.